Good afternoon. I will call to order this regular council meeting of the municipality of Jasper for September 5th, 2023. To begin, I will acknowledge that our land acknowledgement policy provides that a territorial acknowledgement does not need to be done at every meeting and gathering of the municipality of Jasper, but it should be done when it's meaningful and appropriate. And I find it appropriate and meaningful to issue a land acknowledgement today, although in a form not yet approved by the municipality. And that is because of recent circumstances at the provincial level. So for today, the municipality of Jasper respectfully acknowledges that Jasper National Park and the municipality of Jasper are on Treaty 6 and 8 territories, as well as Jasper House District of the Otipemisiwak Métis. This land is the traditional territory, meeting ground, gathering place, traveling route, and home for the Denza, Nahiwak, Anishinaabe, Secwepemc, Stoney Nakoda, and the Otipemisiwak Métis. And so congratulations to them for their new status and elections that they will be having soon to appoint representatives to various Métis regions in the province, including the newly named Jasper House District. Councillors, you have today's proposed agenda before you. Are there any additions, deletions, or other changes to be made to the agenda? Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. I would like to add agenda item 9.1, an in-camera session regarding strategic communication.
Thank you. Councillor Demota, Deputy Mayor Demota, I guess I should say this is the first meeting at which you now sit as Deputy Mayor. So thank you to Councillor Kelleher MP for her service for the last 2 months, and welcome Councillor Demota to your position as from acting to deputy. And go ahead, I recognized you first in order of your hand being up first, not your elevated status.
I don't know about elevated, but it is a real honor and you know, a high accolade to be able to represent the community at this level. So I will do my best in my position to help council and you, sir. To add to the in-camera session, just a legal matter as well on top of the strategic communication. Now that we have that available. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Your Worship. With respect, I'd like to add item 6.8, which will be a discussion on the 2022 operating surplus and report to council for review. If that's appropriate.
It is. If you could just give me the wording again, just for my notes.
To add item 6.8, a discussion on the 2022 operating surplus for council review. This was based on a report that we received in about April prior to our finalized financial statements, and prior to, at that point, that surplus being distributed as per our policy, we should have an opportunity to take a look at A, what the surplus is, and then B, how we would distribute it.
Thank you for that, Councillor Melnick. And if I can get my laptop to come alive again, I will proceed. I think then I would require a motion first to add to today's agenda item number 6.8 being a council discussion of the 2022 operating surplus, and adding to today's agenda item 9.1, an in-camera session dealing with strategic communications and legal matters. I have that motion, please, from someone. Deputy Mayor Demota, thank you. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That's carried. And may I have a motion then, please, to approve the agenda for today's meeting as amended? Councillor Waxer, thank you. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. We have 3 sets of minutes for approval today, beginning with the regular meeting minutes of August 15th, 2023. Are there any errors, omissions, or corrections required to be made to those minutes? Seeing none, may I have a motion, please, to have council approve the minutes of the August 15th, 2023 regular council meeting as presented? Councillor Waxer, thank you. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That's carried. We have as well before us the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting of August 22nd, 2023. Are there any errors, omissions, or corrections required to be made to those minutes? Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Worship. On page 8 of our agenda today, we had received a report, our simply quarterly report, and in part of that receiving of the report, that committee directed administration to forward the questions and comments to Sergeant Badesi for consideration. If appropriate, have we received any answers to the questions that we asked of Sergeant Badesi?
Thank you for that, Councillor Melnick. I don't have an answer. I can turn to administration just for clarity. I take it that you don't have an issue with the form of the minutes. This is more business arising than any comment about the accuracy of the minutes. Thank you. Ms. Nadal.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to Councillor Melnick, I haven't had a chance to meet with Sergeant Badesi yet, and I do not have an answer at this time.
Thank you for that. And I turn again to the question, are there any errors, omissions, or corrections required to be made to the minutes? As opposed to matters arising, which I'm happy to deal with, but technically these minutes are here for our approval. And if there are no alterations to be made, might I have a motion, please, to approve the minutes of the August 22nd, 2023 Committee of the Whole meeting as presented? Councillor Melnick. Thank you. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That's carried. And finally, we have the legislative committee meeting minutes of August 29th, 2023. Are there any errors, omissions, or corrections required to be made to those minutes? Councillor Hall.
Make a motion to approve minutes.
I have a motion from Councillor Hall to approve the minutes of the legislative committee meeting of August 29th, 2023 as presented. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. That takes us through that business portion of today's agenda. We turn to agenda item 4, correspondence. We have nothing on our agenda and nothing new to add. Mr. Given, take it. So that takes us to agenda item 5, delegations. We do have consultants who will be joining us on our platform, and I will turn to Mr. Given to introduce our guests and the subject matter.
Thanks very much, Your Worship. So Council will likely remember that earlier this year, our former municipal energy manager brought forward an item of information to Council with respect to climate resilience capacity building program. It's a program of the Municipal Climate Change Action Centre through Alberta municipalities. December of last year, we submitted an expression of interest to participate in the program. And then in early 2023, the MCC-AC, Municipal Climate Change Action Centre, confirmed that our project was eligible to receive up to $80,000 in funding. Council approved participating in that program and launching that work. We secured the money. And following securing the money, we secured consultants from the Resilience Institute. Laura and Henry are here to guide you into what are the next steps and the next phases in this project. As a reminder, the intention of the project and the deliverables are intended to be regional climate projections and a suite of about climate change materials that are relevant to Jasper in our area that we can use in communicating with the public. It will also deliver a whole community climate risk assessment that will consider climate impacts on our natural and built infrastructure, the health and wellness of our community, and the culture of our community members. And all of that will be wrapped up together in a final report with recommendations for adaptation strategies and next steps that we can take as the municipality. The stage that we're at right now is in developing the climate risk assessment, and that is the documents that are in your package. And that is what Laura and Henry are going to speak to today. I believe they have a couple of slides of information. But really, this is the launch of public engagement on this phase of the project. So you are the first to see this. It is, of course, public now because it's in the council package. But later on this month, administration and Laura and Henry will be engaging with Jasper residents, businesses, and stakeholders to validate some of the information that's here and the concepts as we go on and build out the rest of this project. So, Laura, I'm going to pass it over to you and Henry, and you can take away the presentation.
Okay, I'll just say hi and let everybody know that Harry, he goes by Harry, it's Dr. Penn, but he likes the informality of Harry, is going to do most of the presentation, but I'll be here to answer any questions. I'm the president and CEO of the Resilience Institute. We're a national charity, and we're really quite excited about being able to partner with Jasper. Okay, over to you, Harry.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Your Worship, and council members for giving us the opportunity to present to all of you today. I'm calling in from home, which is in Calgary, on the traditional territory of the people of Treaty 7, and the home of Region 3 of Métis Nation of Alberta. I have a presentation for you today that I'm just going to go through kind of where we are with the project as Bill has outlined, and kind of give you our next steps and help introduce the documents that we've shared as well. So as Laura mentioned, the Resilience Institute is a national charitable organization based in Alberta. Really our focus and our mission is on climate resilient futures and reducing the risks of disasters in those futures. Broadly speaking, we're an education charity, but we have research included in that to advance the knowledge on climate change and sustainability. And interestingly, we're a distributed network. We're a small core team of people that work for the Resilience Institute, and then subject matter experts as needed. So that really gives us the opportunity to be nimble, to be able to move from subject to subject, and really kind of benefit the groups that we're lucky enough to work with. Everything that we do, and I hope this comes through today and in the documents that we've shared with you, it is transdisciplinary in nature. We work across spaces and across organizations with different local partnerships, Indigenous communities, academia and government. And as everything we do, we try and co-develop what we do. So we unite those diverse knowledge holders, multi-generationals, whether it's working with experts like yourselves or with youth in your community, and really try to build that local capacity for adaptation into the future. So just a quick bit of scoping before we get into the actual nuts and bolts of what it is that we're doing with the municipality of Jasper. Some climate change terms. So our day-to-day experience of atmospheric conditions and things like temperature, precipitation, we call that weather events. The distinction here to what we're doing within the climate change risk assessment is that we're looking at the weather and other sort of atmospheric conditions in a very specific region, which in our case here is the municipality of Jasper, but over a longer period of time. And so in this instance for this project, we are looking at a 30-year time horizon out to the mid-2050s, early 2060s. And so what we're looking at here, what some of the documents are helping to present, is where are those significant changes, increases, decreases in climate hazards, climate risks that are going to occur over those several decades, over that 30-year horizon. And then broadly speaking, that gives us two kind of approaches for what to do once we understand those risks and hazards. The first is mitigation, which I think a lot of us hear about in the news, things like reducing emissions, carbon capture, things like that. And those are everything sort of staying the same, but we're going to mitigate it. Adaptations, on the other hand, are what are we going to do to adapt to those risks, to adapt to those changes? What do we need to put in place to buffer against the hazards and risks that we're going to see? And the bulk of this climate change risk assessment is going to be more in that adaptation space than that mitigation space. So as we've started this project with Bill and his team and the other partners on this project, which are Associated Engineering and the University of Regina, we've come up with these 15 climate hazards that we're going to be assessing. These represent sort of broad points of intersection between the municipality of Jasper and climate change, both now and in the future. And so these are the areas that we are going to be considering. The way that a climate risk assessment process breaks down is that for each climate hazard, we sort of peel off in two directions. And so on the one side of the screen, we've got the climate parameter. We use climate data projections. This is the work that the Prairie Resilience Adaptation Center are doing at the University of Regina, David Salchin, and they're taking the climate parameters, they're taking climate data, and they're turning it into likelihood scores. And so we look at that climate data and say, right now in this moment, what is the likelihood of any given one of these climate hazards happening? And we give it a score of 1 to 5, low to high in terms of the statistical likelihood of it occurring. We then use the climate data, the climate projections, and we look forward, as I said, 30 years into the future, around the mid-2050s, and we say again, what are the likelihoods of these climate hazards occurring? And the most particular part of the information that we're looking at is when we compare those two numbers, those two likelihoods, is what is the relative change? And so, for example, if I take something like extreme heat, we would use days above 30 degrees Celsius as the measure. And just to sort of use a number as examples, we may say in this current year in 2023, we'd be expecting 15 days above that 30 degrees Celsius. Project out into the future and say the number is 45, then it's that relative change that we're looking at. There is going to be an increase in those days of above 30 degrees Celsius. On the other side of the risk assessment process, we look for some impact statements. And so the way that we do this is we take each climate hazard in turn and we identify as many different impacts that we can associate with that climate hazard that may impact on the municipality of Jasper, on the community's social, natural, or built environment. And so that's everything from capital assets and critical infrastructure through to people's ability to move and come around the community, to be able to exercise, to be able to recreate, through to forest fires, access to natural resources, water, and so on. For each of those impact statements, and I can tell you the list ends up being sort of in the order of 150 to 200 by the time we've gone through this process, we assign a consequence to them. And so that is, if this impact occurred at any given moment in time, what would the consequence of that be? And we've developed a rubric. It's in your packet to sort of explain a little bit how we go through that process and what a 1 versus a 3 versus a 5 means. But nevertheless, we associate a consequence score with every single one of those impact statements for the climate hazards on a social, natural, built environment perspective. And then the way that we calculate risk is we simply multiply the likelihood score by the consequence score, and we get a risk score of a 1 to 25 scale. And so this is sort of the moment where the rubber hits the road. So we've got the consequence scoring on the y-axis, we've got the likelihood scoring on the x-axis, and we bring the two numbers together. And so the way that the typical risk assessment process would go is that we look in that top right corner, the 20s, the 25s, the areas in that, we call it a heat map in this grid, that would be in red. The secondary considerations are the ones in amber, the sort of 12s to 15s and 18s. However, that's sort of the conventional process. And as I mentioned at the top of our presentation, the Resilience Institute takes a bit more of a transdisciplinary approach to all the work that we're doing. And so we're going to map every single impact statement. We're going to map every single likelihood score and really take more of a holistic view of the municipality of Jasper's risk assessment and look at where are the points of adaptation that we can use to maximize a response to climate change. And so it may be that once we've gone through this process, that we start at the lower end and there's some sort of low-hanging fruit that we can tick off, that we can develop plans and adaptation strategies for, that we can look for funding for before we get into the bigger pieces. Maybe some of these earlier pieces, actually have an action on the bigger pieces and kind of bring them down as well. So rather than just going straight for the top corner, we're going to have a holistic view as we go through this project. And so that's my presentation for today. That's a little bit of the information that's in your packet. Sort of just next steps before I take a pause and give an opportunity for some questions if you have any. The Resilience Institute is going to be in the municipality of Jasper on the 20th and 21st of September. We have an evening space booked on the 20th in the Quorum room at the Jasper Activity Centre, and we're going to make that time available to go into a little bit more detail on this presentation, but also be available for community members and everyone else to kind of ask questions and get involved in the project. And then we're going to be hosting individual meetings with particular managers and other experts so that we can get into the weeds on these impact statements. And then we'll be moving into the next steps of the project from there. So thank you all for your attention, and thank you again for this opportunity to present to you.
Thank you, Dr. Penn, or Harry, and appreciate the wall art behind you. Reminiscent of somebody else, it seems to me. In any event, questions from councillors? I had only one, and that is with respect to the risk assessment process and the graph that you gave us there, and in particular, the definition of impact statements. And so on the right-hand side in the bar, you've got some words that better identify that. Mm-hmm. What I thought might have been included there is the economic environment of the community. And I know that does come later when you talk about impacts on tourism and on the economy, but it's possible, of course, to see the economic environment as part of the social environment. But in our community, with an economy based almost entirely on preservation of a natural environment, the economic impacts of climate change are among the most significant. And so I just question whether you might add to that definition by indicating that it's any impacts that climate hazard may have on the community's social, economic, natural, or built environment.
Thank you for that comment. I think it's a really valid one. And so there is a distinction, frankly, between the slides that I've given you today and what you'll find in the packet. And I will say that Bill has been a huge help and a guide on this as well. So in addition to the built, natural, and social, you will find through the impact statements that there is an economic lens overlaid, either explicitly or within the impact statement themselves. And I think as we go through the process of engaging with the municipality of Jasper on the 20th and 21st, I have no doubt that we'll be expanding on that. We have the intention to meet with the Chamber of Commerce and other private sector organizations. And the documents that you have before you today are draft documents. They're intended to solicit the sort of response and questions that you've just asked, and so we will incorporate that as we receive the information. So thank you.
Yeah, and we can be explicit by adding that word in, because noted, even though we think it's broadly applied, it may not be obvious to somebody who's just looking at it for. So that's a great reflection. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Wilson?
My fault, I forgot to check the mic. Just hoping that we can ensure engagement with you guys, and just wanted to ask administration if they've been working with you to advertise. You know, I'm assuming that our communications team can help out to make sure that people do show up on your engagement nights.
Your Worship, I can speak to Councillor Wilson's question. Administration is working with the team, obviously, to get the word out. So we've been focused a little bit on other operational sort of launches that have happened this week. But this is the next one that's in the queue. Additionally, we're going to use this project as an opportunity to pilot our new online engagement platform the municipality has. So we're going to have the in-person engagement that will have both broad opportunity for anybody to attend, a open house style session. There will also be targeted engagements. Well, Laura and Henry are here. Harry, sorry, are here. So we'll have the targeted engagements by ensuring that we get certain stakeholders to the table. We'll have broad engagement by allowing any member of the public to engage at the open house session, which we'll be advertising, and we'll have a longer period of engagement for those people that might like to think about things a little bit more, take them away, and perhaps give more detailed responses and information. So we're going to be doing engagement 3 ways. And we're going to, again, as I said, use this as an opportunity to pilot and test out our new online engagement platform.
Deputy Mayor Taboda?
Thank you. I'm sorry if I missed the fact that we were going to actually go through some of the rubric and the likelihood scores in the document that was provided to us. So I'd had some questions on the percentage changes. I know how much you like numbers being over 100%, Your Worship. And I was just wondering if we could talk a little bit about that scoring, although preliminary right now, and I don't want to raise any alarms in the community, but it's good to talk about these things. And there's some things on there that, you know, might be of interest outside of wildfires and smoke in our community.
So there's a couple of things here, and those likelihood scores are it's a difficult thing to present because there's quite a lot, as I'm sure you've realized, to unpack. So I appreciate the question. So the percentage changes are simply just frankly the mathematical relationship between the climate hazard and the climate risk now and that they perceive based on the available data in the future. So that's the first piece. The second piece is that the actual likelihood score themselves. So we have the option, and I hope that we've explained it well enough in the sort of foreshadowing of the document to pick where we start the baseline. And so typically in this process, you would start at a 3 and go up and down from there. We're trying to make it a little bit more nuanced because all discussions of climate change and climate risk at a community level are. And so we have the option to start the baseline at 2 or 3 or 4, and then, you know, go up and down from there. And so one of the questions we have in the document, one of the questions we'll be posing during engagement is, you know, are we starting at a 3? Are we starting at a 4? You know, is this something we can start at a 2 and go up and down from there? The the mechanics of the percentage change are really in relation to whether or not we're going up and down on the likelihood score. But if there are sort of those, big more than 100% change striking numbers that we need to get into and kind of work with community to explain and understand, we certainly can do. The last thing that I'll add is that as you've probably noted in that table, to get from quite a, as I say, nuanced climate hazard, even something just as maybe fundamental as extreme temperature, you have to pick a parameter. And so we can change to a certain degree what parameter we pick if there is a parameter that would make more sense. And so typically for things like this, I'm thinking about any flooding metrics, because we use a rainfall intensity and duration that is maybe standardized for this process. But if we talking to public works in the municipality of Jasper or asset managers, we find out that actually there's a better rainfall intensity that more aligns with the way that things have been designed. We can change that out again. Did I get anywhere close?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's great. And, specifically, like, just to go on to one of the items there in conversation of hail and the severe summer hail days. And there's something there that, has alarming numbers attributed to it. And something that we don't see a lot here. And is this something that's that we're seeing trending in the foothill areas, and particularly where there's more Chinooks now? And I know I'm talking about Calgary where you live and stuff, but I see that in this scoring that the future likelihood of these incidences are going to be increasing in the mountain regions, I guess, and particularly our community as described. So I would like to know a little bit more about that, seeing that we have a 1,727% potential increase there.
Yeah, thank you for that question. So I think there's two things here that I'm really looking forward to working on engagement. The first is that sort of what the data is saying versus what local perceptions are. I'm not from Jasper. I don't live in the municipality of Jasper, and so what the data is telling us is going to be one part of the story, but what people's lived experiences are, and how many days of hail in this instance that people have experienced over their lifetimes, and those two interactions of those, two very valuable data sets we're going to dig into, and we can change the way that the risk assessment works based on that. The second thing, on a sort of more fundamental climatic level, the simple answer is yes. Climate change and climate hazards, you're seeing the incidences of climate related weather events track north. And so, looking at southern Alberta now, there is going to be a certain amount of those weather events, and that sort of general climatological feel will be in the municipality of Jasper by the time we get to the 2050 time horizon. And there's going to be some unusuality along with that.
I love that you brought up hail, because I grew up in the prairies and then I now live in the mountains. I live in Canmore, and of course in the prairies we get golf size hail, but in the mountains we all say, well, we don't really get hail. If it is, it's just a little. We don't get that. And then this year we had about a 10 to 15 minute full on dime size onslaught of hail. And all of us said, well, we just don't get that in the mountains. And so these statements of we don't historically get this, but now we are getting them, are really important. And but what does that mean? Does that mean for risk management? Does that mean golf size hail, or does that mean dime size hail? And that's going to be an important consideration of the environment.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, and I appreciate Councillor Demota, Deputy Mayor Demota, bringing up the hail. What my eye caught was the freezing range, and we had a 40% change when we have no historic value and no future value. I'm just wondering if the numbers that are here are the numbers that'll be presented later in September, because the next two there, freezing rains and high winds, for future likelihood is pretty severe. but I don't see data supporting that.
Thank you for the question. I don't have any. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't have an immediate answer for where that data is coming from. It will be something that we will have filled in and be able to speak to by the time we come to our engagements at the middle of the month. The one thing that I will say, particularly on the freezing rain events and also freezing degree days, is it's again, this is about those parameters and which ones you pick to describe any particular climate hazard. For freezing degree days, and I believe it's the same for freezing rain events. It's really about the number of days where you've jumped between zero, above zero, and below zero. But I can confirm that and make a comment back to you, because you are right. There are some pieces there that, whilst the numbers have been assessed, the data is not immediately available.
Well, and I can also add, just so you know where some of this came from, not all of it came from, is that the Prairie Adaptation Research Collaborative Park is who we worked with on the climate modeling, and what they did is a very detailed climate model for the region, for Jasper and Hinton as well. So every 25 kilometers squared, and that data goes out for, I believe, to 2050, and 2050.
Yeah.
So we start with that data. And then we look at what's historical. We make some, with associated engineering, some assumptions about what you've seen and what you expect. So that's where you're seeing some of those big numbers. And it is with a mountain lens. So this is why it's really important. And we want to make sure those are right. Because if you've never had this before, and in 10 years or 20 years, you're expecting to have something new, this is where the planning document is going to inform how you move forward with your risk management and why it's so important. But I think what's going to be really key is that you have that rationale unpacked, so that you're able to explain, like, this wasn't just out of thin air. This isn't based on projections that are global or for the prairies. This is based on projections that are very specific to Jasper and area. And here's where that data came from, so that you have that rationale for backing up your decisions.
Thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Is it appropriate at this stage, because you didn't get to this directly in your presentation, Doctor, but to comment on the parameters and perhaps on the impacts at this stage?
Thank you, Your Worship, for the question. I would say that the documents that we have provided to Council today are for your review, and if there are questions, comments, concerns, whether they relate specific to the risk assessment or whether just for general interest to learn more about the topic, to include those in the document, and we'll review them. If you're not particularly comfortable with the Google Doc, then we do have hard copies available that I can provide to you. If you want to just give me an email or a phone call, I believe we've included all of that information in the packet, and we can go through it page by page. I'm happy with any of those formats, but you're welcome to comment as extensively or not as you would like.
Your Worship, if I may, administration will also ensure that Council receives, access to the online engagement platform. I mean, you're all residents of Jasper, you will anyways, but we'll make sure to email that out to you when it launches, so that if you have specific input or feedback that you'd like to provide, you have that opportunity. Again, giving you a little bit of time to think about it. I think if there's an observation that you wanted to make or share, I think that now's as good a time as any to do it, because it will show the public that this is something that they can also be commenting on. And I also appreciate Harry saying that if you want to give him a call and go through it in detail, he's happy to do that as well. Thanks, Harry, for that offer. I say that a little bit tongue in cheek, but certainly if there's something that you want to identify, by all means, please do here. And you will have an opportunity to provide long form or more detailed information as a part of that public process.
And if it's okay, I would just like to add that this process is iterative. Once you get the final document, because we'll do the best we can for engagement and information and rationale, but it's a dynamic situation. There are changes, and I'm sure you've heard about tipping points happening. There's changes happening in the environment. So what we do today may not be relevant in 5 years. It might not be relevant in 2 years. We think it will be, but there are situations, conditions that may change it. So what's important about this document is it's a starting place. It'll give some really great information for decision making, but it is iterative. You will be able to use that as a base to then build on in the future. So it's not like this is what you have for 10 years and you'd have to start the whole process over again. It's going to give you a really great baseline to work from. Thank you for that.
All right, well, I appreciate all of that. I think I heard an invitation from Mr. Gibbon, and I will try and be succinct. My concern is simply to further facilitate engagement by our public, by, I think, broadening the parameters to give them some expanded room for thought. And so in particular, and they are brief, but for lightning and for hail, and hail we discussed, rather than a parameter for the number of days, I wonder whether there's a parameter that can include intensity. And you mentioned that the size of hail, and it's not just how many days we get hail, but how intense is that hail? And it's not just the number of days we get lightning. We recently had a lightning storm that lasted longer than any lightning storm I can recall. And so it's that intensity that makes a difference as well. So I don't know how you reword the parameter, but you might consider that. For wildfire smoke, we're kind of like Newfoundland, it came from away. And measuring area burnt within our region doesn't give a real indication of the impact of wildfire smoke, because we have smoke here throughout the summer from places not within the region, and it has a real impact on our community. So again, broadening the parameters a bit, I think, would be useful for our community. And again, on the freeze thaw issue, there is for extreme heat measurement of the days above 30, but it seems to me for our local economy, particularly the winter economy, the number of days either below or above freezing from November to end of April makes a huge difference to our product offered here, particularly cross-country skiing. It ruins every time there's a melt. And so a different parameter that measures the number of days of melt, not just in the freeze thaw context, but in the overall context of our winter offer here, would be important from my perspective. And then finally, just on impacts, I just had one comment, and you've got, I think, glacier recession as one of the 15 climate, whatever the word was. But there are a number of things that impact that, including wildfire smoke. I just read an article in CBC today, so it's somehow trying to combine some of those elements. But here, for drought, you've indicated that drought typically would result in a reduction in water availability. Near the headwaters and with glacier melt, that's probably less of an issue here, but drought certainly enhances the risk of wildfire. And it also apparently changes bear activity, which is a social issue here, which is alarming and quite prevalent. But it's not regarded as an impact. And so again, looking at impacts that are more specific to our environment and how we live with wildlife, I think would help engage our residents in their response.
Thank you, Your Worship, for those comments. My desk is a flood of sticky notes now, so I'll make sure that they find their way into the document. And I really appreciate you identifying the interplay between the various different climate hazards and the impacts on your community members, because this is something that we have been ruminating on as we've gone through this risk assessment process. Is that how do you take what is quite an engineering approach, quite a quantitative approach, and layer on those really important, valuable kind of qualitative lenses. And that's something that we're going to use the engagement for, your comments and other community comments as we go through the engagement process, and try and enrich the document. Our goal is to have both considered equally, and a better product because of it.
Thanks for that. Go ahead, Laura.
So what Harry said too is very important because this is new. Risk assessments have conventionally been handled from a very asset management perspective. And there are protocols that have been developed where engineers sign off on that do include social thinking. But out of all of them, none of them are appropriate for smaller, rural, or Indigenous communities. And this is where we are really trying to focus our work on, because what is suitable for a large municipality like Edmonton or Calgary is not suitable for places like Jasper or Canmore. I mean, they are unique. And so we have found ourselves idealistically really wanting to work with the engineers and collaborate. But when it comes time to actually doing the work, there's a lot of work to do to make sure that we're doing a robust climate risk assessment that can be signed off on by protocols, but is also community relevant. And this is where we're finding, working with the engineers, they'll say some words and we'll say, well, that's not necessarily relevant to this community. And you just nailed it when you were talking about wildlife and how we introduce, well, what wildlife? Because there's it's a little different to changes in deer and elk movement to changes in large carnivore movement like bears. So we really we do this is exactly what we want when we talk about something being community relevant. This is it. So no one's done this before at a community level. So in a way, you're working with us on something new, and we appreciate it. It may take us a little longer to get there because there isn't a cookie cutter approach, but we'll get there. So thank you for that.
Oh, thank you. Deputy Mayor Demota.
Well, I thank you very much, and I really appreciate like the information and the detail that we have in front of us today, and I look forward to more engagement to see what comes out of this. But I am grateful to see that economic tourism systems are identified here, and of course those are going to be relevant in other communities as well. Definitely economic, but another exposure that we have to the elements, and if we're going to go and build in resiliency, that's going to come at a cost to the local taxpayer and stuff. And because we're primarily dealing with tourism in our community, and if we have any instances that's going to hinder those processes, it takes a lot longer for our community to bounce back. And another reason why the province needs to recognize that we're in a little bit more of a different situation and exposure to other areas. And I'm not going to say that other areas don't have those, but when we get affected, when our tourism gets affected, our whole community gets affected. So I'm grateful to see that add on to the economic part in this, and I look forward to hearing what community members give their feedback on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions, comments, or observations to pass along to our guests? Councillor Waxer.
Just echoing Councillor Demota's comments, I really appreciated the inclusion of social impact on social systems. I think that is very, very true and something that we often don't think about. So thank you for that.
Thank you. And maybe I'll just add one comment just on both of your points there. Thank you for them. Is that, as I mentioned in the presentation, we'll be reviewing every single impact statement, and part of the rationale for doing that, because we are conscious that some of these adaptation measures that we maybe eventually identify could, have a significant price attached to them. But looking at the whole risk assessment, looking at every single impact statement really allows yourselves as leaders, but also the community as a whole to figure out where the point of entry is on climate adaptation. It's not just the big, massive infrastructure projects. There's going to be some pieces that are further down the list of options that nevertheless can have a substantive impact on adapting to climate change. And so, we're conscious of that, and I appreciate you bringing it up.
Deputy Mayor Demota.
Well, I'm just wondering in our consultations if we can include other agencies or invite other agencies into community. I know that Community Futures has an interest in some disaster resiliency, and I think that they would be good for the region. But foremost, because we're here talking about our community, I think groups like that would benefit, and so would the community, respectively. On that note, the mayor offered some information sharing. I don't know if either of you, Laura and Harry, go on Purple Air on their website at all, but I find that their mobile site as opposed to their app works really good, and I'm on it every day to check the air quality in our community, but it's really accurate for other things, particularly temperature, and you can get really nerdy on those things, and I just like to share that, and also for the viewers that are watching this today. We do have 3 monitors in our community, and at various times they show different readings, so it's quite interesting. So I just like to promote that because I think some of the information there is eye-opening, and it kind of ripples into our discussions today. I think the more that people are aware of what's happening in the community would drive more interest into being more aware of what we need to do for being resilient in our community. Thank you.
Purple Air is terrific, and if you want to get really nerdy, go into the settings and you can change it from the US, how the US criteria versus Canada criteria, and see the difference. So the Canada criteria always seems to show the ppm lower than the US, and that is it's just a really great example of what you use for climate models as well, depending on what you refer to, the outcomes you're going to get are different. That's why we try to use a combination, and when we say robust, it's a combination of different models instead of just one, because you can make decisions. So there you go. If I use the Canada one and I just didn't look outside and I made my decision what I was going to do for that day, but I walked outside and actually the US one was more accurate, that's a big difference. So it's a great example of how indicators can really change your decision making.
All right, thank you again, both of you, for the presentation and the report. I will, in a moment, call for a motion to receive the presentation for information, but I just want to confirm, Mr. Given, is there anything you need from council to carry on your work with the Resiliency Institute to get this before the public?
Your worship, no. Council has given its approval to the project. So we wanted to bring this update today to council to make you aware of the status of the project, where we're at, and also to use the council meeting as a bit of an opportunity to remind the public of this project and invite them to get involved. So we'll ensure that the engagement opportunities are advertised fully out into the community and circulated to council as well. No further action required.
Thank you for that. Then do I have a councillor prepared to make a motion? Councillor Keller-Hrampe. Thank you. That motion is that council receive the presentation from the Resilience Institute for information. No debate. I'll call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is unanimous. So again, thank you both for the presentation and look forward to your engagement with the community.
Thank you so much. Us too.
Thank you.
That's great.
Yeah. That takes us to agenda item 6.1, we have been requested to proclaim Rail Safety Week in Jasper. It is a national event. We are both historically and currently a railway town. Railway safety is particularly important, and we have people at and near and crossing railway tracks at all hours of the day and night in this community, and we encourage them all to be safe while they do so. So is there a councillor who wishes to speak to the matter and perhaps make a motion? Councillor Waxer?
I would be very happy to make that motion as the wife of a previous railroader and now the mother of conductor in training. I think it's appropriate that I make this motion that council proclaim the week of September 18th to the 24th, 2023 as Rail Safety Week.
Any debate or comments? I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. And I do therefore, on behalf of council and the municipality of Jasper, hereby proclaim the week of September 18th to 24th, 2023 as Rail Safety Week. That takes us to agenda item 6.2, Forest Resource Improvement Association of Alberta grant application. I think this was before us for consideration at the last committee of the whole meeting with a recommendation from committee to move it for council approval today. Are there any questions of administration before I ask for a councillor to make the motion? If not, I would invite a councillor to make a motion. Councillor Waxer.
That council approve an application to the Forest Resource Improvement Association of Alberta for grant funding toward a new 10-year wildfire mitigation strategy.
Is there any debate on that motion? I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Agenda item 6.3. A proposal to perhaps cancel the committee of the whole meeting currently set for September 26th, which is the beginning of the Alberta Munis Convention and elected officials training program, I think on the Tuesday, the day before the start of the actual convention. Mr. Given, did you wish to speak to this?
Your Worship, I would just say that it's come to administration's attention that a number of elected officials are making the opportunity to do the education sessions in advance of the actual conference. And so for a variety of reasons, it doesn't appear that we'll have quorum for that committee meeting. And so our recommendation is that council should formally cancel that committee meeting. And that's certainly up for discussion, debate, or other solutions that council might wish to identify.
Thank you for that. Can I just get confirmation, those councillors who know categorically they will not be here on September 26th? That's a quorum who won't be here. And I'm going to take it without reasonable access to join by Zoom. Okay. Well, in that case, then there is no sense holding a meeting when there are only three of us, and we can't do that.
There is a fifth Tuesday on October 31st. I'm just pointing that out.
Well, before we get there, let's get over the 26th. So is there a councillor prepared to make the motion? The motion on the motion sheets? Councillor Wilson? The motion is that council cancel the September 26, 2023 committee of the whole meeting due to lack of quorum. That's your motion? Yeah. Okay. Any debate on that? I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Agenda item 6.4, reallocation of capital funds. Again, this comes to us by way of recommendation from Committee of the Whole at our last meeting. Is there any questions of administration prior to a motion being tabled or presented, I should say? I have to say, it occurs to me that there was some discussion at the last meeting, not necessarily reflected in the recommendation from committee to council, but some discussion about amounts. So we were presented with amounts and an indication that the reallocated spending would be within that amount. And I put that out there. If it provides comfort to councillors to slightly amend a motion today to approve the deletion of the purchase of the 4x4 1-ton pickup truck and the 3/4 ton, and reallocate capital funds not to exceed some amount, whatever that amount was. I'm just recalling that there was discussion and it's not reflected in the motion. So if there's anybody who wants to consider that, now would be a great opportunity. Councillor Kellerman.
I believe also once those recapitalized would have 29,000, I think, remaining in the budget that would be unspent.
Mr. Given, are you able to confirm the amounts that were under discussion last time we met?
Your worship, I believe Director Malinchuk can handle that.
Thank you. Yes, so Director Great had suggested that the first, well, and it's 170,000 that we would be basically omitting from the budget, and then the allocation would be 23,000 less than the 170,000 that was initially approved by council in the budget process. So it would be coming in under budget for those other two items that were initially presented.
And where will that extra $23,000 reside?
Actually, with these two items, they were supposed to be applied through MSIC, and I would just retract those and apply the new projects through the MSIC grant portal. And that means that there would just be less funds spent from the grants that we have available for that area, and open it up for it to be spent elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So as I indicated, there is a recommendation coming forward, but if a councillor wanted to adapt the motion, that would be fine as well. Councillor Wilson.
Forgive me, and I'm assuming this question was answered when in my absence, but just before motions put forward, the purchase of a 4x4 1-ton and a 3/4 ton pickup were necessities at one point, and now they're not needed. Will they not be needed next year? Are we gonna like that?
Your worship, through to Councillor Wilson, that question did arise at the last meeting, and Director Greathead was able to suggest or say that he will not be putting it back into the budget for the foreseeable future. So you will not see them in the next year's capital budget or soon, is what we heard from him during that meeting. And I believe he suggested that it was just with the change of how the operations are going and the staffing and whatnot, that it was he was able to do this with the budget.
Anything else? Is there a councillor with a motion? Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Your Worship. And based on our conversations last week and discussion about the $23,000, that while we talk about these numbers, there still may be a slight variance in the actual purchase price. The $23,000 would also fall within a variance that if additional money was needed to actually purchase the items, that's where that would come from. So it may not be a clear 23,000 coming back into reserves, but that was a good discussion last week. And so if I may, I would like to make the motion that council approve the deletion of the purchase of the 4x4 1-ton pickup truck and the 3/4 ton pickup truck, and reallocate capital funds to proceed with the purchase of a new tractor and implements for winter sidewalk maintenance and a 10-ton dump truck for snow removal operations.
Thank you for that, Councillor Melnick. Is there any debate on that motion? I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Thank you for that. That takes us to agenda item 6.5, Jasper Recreation Complex Renovation Phase 2 Borrowing Bylaw 2023, second reading. No changes since first reading. I presume we went through that and resolved those matters. Councillor Melnick.
If I may, just for a point of clarity on the bylaw item 4.2, we refer to a date of December 31st, 2024. And for some reason, I recall discussion that this would have to be in December of 2023, but I may be incorrect. And I just want to confirm with administration that the borrowing shall come to effect no later than December 2024. Like I say, I'm recalling December 2023, but I stand to be corrected.
Your Worship, if I may, I think to Councillor Melnick, sorry. Councillor Melnick's point, I think you're looking at point number 4.2 in the bylaw, where it says the debenture shall to be issued under this bylaw may be in any denomination not exceeding the amount authorized by this bylaw, and shall be dated having regard to the date on the borrowing, but shall in no event be dated later than 31st of December 2024. So this essentially, if I'm interpreting that correctly, tells administration that we may take this total amount over any number of draws from the bank, if I can use that term, but that we can't do any draws from the bank after December 31st, 2024. So I think that provides administration some flexibility over the course of this year, because the province is the entity that we borrow from, and they have specific deadlines for borrowing. And so they sort of have, I think, a fall, spring, and summer. I think 4 times a year. Thank you. And so administration does sometimes need that flexibility. So, okay, we want to borrow only a certain amount at this period, and then we'll borrow the next amount at the next period. If you've ever done a construction project, you would maybe be familiar with progress payments. And so this gives us a bit of that authorization. But again, setting the maximum amount of time where administration can do this for us.
Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Mr. Given and Ms. Malinchuk. If we do draw later, is there a potential that the interest rate would decline on the draw, or once we enter into this debenture, we are tied into the interest rate, but we're just paying it over we're drawing it over a later period, so the time that it's amortized is actually could save us a little bit of money.
Your Worship, so to be clear, this isn't actually the debenture. You're passing the bylaw, which authorizes administration to go and make that debenture. That point that we just discussed allows us to make up to $11.5 million of borrowing, and it could be in 2 debentures, so 2 borrowing phases, and each of those could have different interest rates, as you said. In the past, where interest rates were steadily declining, municipalities would use this, would strategically do their borrowing. You might use your grant funding first and then borrow 50% of the project, borrowing next, and then do the final 50% of borrowing under another issuance of debt. Let's say that, so it's not borrowing bylaw, because you could expect that the interest rates would go down. I think that's a pretty standard term that's in our bylaw here. Today, I think our interest rates are climbing. I don't know that administration would exercise, I think we would probably be a bit more cautious than saying, well, let's jump on interest rates now because we think they're going to continue to go up over the next year. I think it's fair to say in the market that that's possible. We have some latitude within your authorization that you're giving under the bylaw to exercise our judgment. But we do have some limitations. We can't borrow more than $11.5 million. We can't borrow after December 31st of 2024. And you, in this bylaw, set, I believe, define a maximum borrowing rate, not to exceed 8%. So if we can't do our borrowing within any of those constraints, we need to borrow more than $11.5 million. Oh, the interest rates are higher than 8%. Oh, we need to do the borrowing after December 31st, 2024. Those are all things that we would have to come back to because they would exceed your authorization.
Great, thank you very much. Appreciate the additional clarity.
As Councillor Melnick has now turned our attention to item 4.2 in the borrowing bylaw, and your explanation, Mr. Given, I think makes it clear that the intent of that section is to suggest in the aggregate, so that debentures to be issued they could be in any denomination, not exceeding in the aggregate the amount authorized. So you couldn't have a whole bunch all less than $11.5 million if in the aggregate went over. We all appreciate that is the understanding, but does it help the bylaw to add those 3 words, not exceeding in the aggregate the amount authorized by the bylaw?
Your Worship, and I will maybe look at Director Malinchuk to see if what I'm saying is correct. I think every other borrowing bylaw that we've done has had the same wording, and I don't think we've ever run into trouble before of borrowing multiple $11.5 million just because of this terminology. So I think it may add to the bylaw and improve the specificity. And administration has worked with this format of bylaw many times, and previous councils have approved it, and to no drama.
related to that, is there any information with respect to the advertising that we were required to do? So after first reading, this went out for advertising. I think the most recent one on August 5th, if I recall correctly. And I take it if there was a response that affected the outcome, we would be told about it today.
Yes, Your Worship. The advertising went out for into two newspapers and also notified on our website that July 27th and August 3rd were those two dates that they went out. So that means that should a vote be demanded, it would then be 15 days from the last day of the last publication. So that would be August 10th, which brings us then to the deadline would have been September 1st, just counting business days. Nothing has been received on that effect.
Thank you for that. Councillor DeMota, Deputy Mayor DeMota.
Thank you. I had a bit of an inkling today, or a feeling that we probably might have a few more extra viewers than normal at this meeting. And so just to clarify that the gravity of this borrowing has been debated extensively at other meetings. So, I was going to make a joke about the 11 or so horses that have already left the barn. It's just a matter of where do we get the money, and this is where we get the money to complete that project. So I just wanted to make that clear, because there was some pretty lengthy debates on this, and we got to the conclusion to go ahead with this project. And I'm looking forward to its completion. And just thought to clarify that. Thank you.
Is there a councillor prepared to make a motion that council give a second reading to the bylaw before us? Councillor Wilson?
I would make that motion.
That is a motion that council give second reading to bylaw number 256, the Jasper Recreation Complex Renovation Phase 2 borrowing bylaw 2023. Any debate on that motion? I will call the question. All those in favor? That motion is carried. Under our current system, this bylaw still needs consent of the superintendent, so it will go to Parks Canada and come back to us for third and final reading, probably 2 weeks hence. Thank you for that. Agenda item 6.6, wastewater treatment facilities borrowing bylaw. Similar situation. So I'm going to take it that the advertising requirements were met, and no response indicating that there was a petition requiring a vote on this bylaw, and all other matters are in order. Are there any questions, comments, concerns about the wastewater treatment facilities renovations and upgrades bylaw? If not, Councillor DeMota, Deputy Mayor DeMota.
Again, a lot of debate on that in the past, and so I'm ready to make a motion unless there's any other requests for information. Okay, move that council give second reading to bylaw 255, the wastewater treatment facilities borrowing bylaw 2023.
Thank you for that motion, Deputy Mayor DeMota. Is there any debate? Seeing nothing, I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. We are moving along well and attempt to carry on unless anybody requires a break.
Yes.
Right. There is some indication that for the comfort and convenience of councillors and maybe staff, we could use a break. So I will call recess for 10 minutes. We will reconvene at 3 p.m. Thank you all for that, and thank you for reconvening precisely at 3 o'clock. We are now back in session, and we turn to agenda item 6.7, the director's report from our Director of Finance and Administration, Mrs. Malinchak.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to give a couple highlights of the report. In IT department, you'll see that we've started a know before staff security training with the level of increasing phishings and whatnot that you see within emails and whatnot. So that training is being conducted within full-time users of our infrastructure. We now also have a generator hooked up to our server room, so this assists us in any future problems with power outages. So we're really happy to get that set up. And one other thing that's really high that's been on the IT list is speeding up the internet connection at the operations department, and so this will increase their efficiencies drastically. And they also had a new phone system implemented, and all of this will reduce operating costs slightly, not by a lot, but it's an increase of service with a decreased budget, so that's good. And for budgeting and planning, we have started the process. As you know, it starts early in the summer, basically. One thing to note is that external group funding requests will be presented at committee of the whole meeting. Last year we did 2 meetings split where they came, and this year we're going to try doing one day where they present their projects ideas to council on November 4th. So that would be starting at 9:30. And just to note that public budget presentations will be on November 21st and 22nd this year, starting at 9 a.m. With grants, the big highlight, and it has been publicly recognized, that we did receive grant funding from the Alberta Municipal Water and Wastewater Partnership. And this was a large amount to go towards our wastewater treatment renovations and upgrades in the tune of 1.5 million. So we're excited about that. For staffing, the finance manager position has been posted and management is working currently on the selection process. Front desk on-call coverage has been filled and training has begun. And HR coordinator has resigned as of September 8th. And luckily, the position has been filled to begin on September 11th. So that you'll see a new face in as the HR coordinator coming soon. For administration, one thing to go over was our business license. This year, there was 786 business licenses registered for 2023 to date. There still could be more. And of those, 500 are residential. There are some conversations surrounding business licenses these days. So I thought we would, dive into that number and look at how many are residential, non-res. And that's what we're looking at. All have been paid except for one. So really good news on that. We have been working through Alberta Purchasing Connection. There was a request for proposal submitted for an IT master plan that was approved within the budget process for 2023, as well as asset retirement obligations for the public sector accounting board 3280. So that will be going over any of our assets that will set up liabilities for our books. So that would be anything like, for instance, the big one is asbestos, lead within our buildings. They would look at anything within the ground for buried tanks or whatnot, and the transfer station, wastewater treatment and such. So this is to provide the municipality with more information going forward so that it can set us up knowing what the potential costs would be associated with mitigating those issues going into future projects. So that is going on as well, and that was approved within the 23 capital budget as well. And since last report, utilities has been posted for another 4 months, so 6 months of revenue have been collected, and it is at the expected revenue of 50% at that time of year. So it is the model seems to be working well, and it is going as projected. When it comes down to assessment and taxation, before we got into the tax rate bylaw, it was mentioned that we had received 4 appeals requesting 5.8 million in assessment change of our 1.8 billion of current 2022 assessments. All 4 were resolved without going to hearing and resulting in 1.2 million of adjustments rather than the 5.8 that was applied for. So I think all in all, very good result. And on the forefront also is paid parking. Paid parking is looking very good, and we're anticipating that we will generate over the budgeted amount for 2023. For communications and engagement, the tax notices were mailed out by June 15th as needed, and payments were due by July 17th. Currently, 3% of the posted levy is in arrears. So that's standing in a pretty typical date at this point. We will see more come in during the rest of the year, but 3% of the tax levy for this year is outstanding. And then as discussed today, we went over the borrowing bylaws for wastewater treatment plant and recreation renovation. So the advertisements were issued for the 2 weeks and came back today for the second read. And then we'll come back again after certification. The only change within the 2 bylaws actually to note were that we had the amendment to the term in the wastewater treatment plant area was it from 15 years to 20 years. And other than that, the reserve request for decision being presented to council, it will be coming back at the September 12th committee of the whole for decision finally on September 19th. I know that it's been a long wait for council, and I appreciate your patience. It's been a bit of a process going through the new process of looking at the surplus and whatnot. So now I have everything to perfection, so it'll be a lot easier to do this process in future years. But currently we're looking at discussing about a 700,000 surplus to discuss in the next meeting, and how council would like to look at that going into the new year, and probably just discuss the policy a bit more and whatnot. So that is planned for September 12th. Other than that, within the context of the report, I've posted both March 31st and June 30th dates and where the municipality was at that time. So to highlight on mid-year, the operation of the municipality is on par. It's doing well. You can see that there are some variances, but there are many things that still need to be posted. There's adjustments that need to be made. There's still reallocations of capital. There's expenses that need to occur with, where we would have collected the money for Alberta School Foundation, but haven't had to pay the remittance yet. And such, but all is looking very good at this point when we're looking at revenue and expenses for the year. Also posted as per policy was the council budget for March as well as June. And for March, we were it was at a 25%, so perfect, and is sitting a bit higher at 60% at mid-year for council, but we have some months to go, so with a bit probably less things going on in the fall and winter. And then with your capital reporting, I also included the March and June, and you can see where we are mid-year. The municipality has currently spent 3.5 million of 29 million, but work is underway for the rec center and the wastewater treatment plant, and we will see a change in that shortly. And that completes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Malinchak. Questions from councillors? Councillor Keller-Hamby.
Thank you, Mayor and Chief Malinchak. I'm quite interested in the business license. 786,500 of them are home businesses. Do you have a breakdown how many are private home accommodation versus entrepreneurs?
I am sorry, I don't have that breakdown. So the 500, or sorry, I want to go back to my numbers. For business licensing, so the 500 that are they're residential, not just home based, so they're locals. And yes, I didn't go into breaking it down to what it's very easy to do though. So we will have more information as we talk about the business license in the future in the process.
Great, thank you. You're welcome.
Thank you, Councillor Keller-Hamby. Other questions? Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Your Worship. I appreciate seeing the commentary about the know before training. Can that training also be made available to councillors and the mayor, and to make sure that we're not out of step with what's going on? And I've actually gone through this training a number of years ago, and it's actually very beneficial for anyone who's working in an environment with the exposure that we have as a municipality. So that training would be appreciated if it could be extended to us. The question I had also was about the councillors' budget and being at 60%. We are coming into a period of time where we'll be attending Alberta Munis, and I'm looking at the expenses. I don't think our registration and travel and that would not be in there as yet because it hasn't occurred. So if we're at 60% after 6 months, I have a funny feeling this is going to be an area that will probably exceed the budget, just based on the number of people going and the costs involved in those related expenses.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Melnick. First of all, I would like to say that yes, council will be involved in the Know Before training. We've broken it into 2 groups. So first targeting the people that use the infrastructure the most, and then we'll go into the second phase of having that training. So yes, you're included. And the second part on the question of travel and subsistence, there is 15,000 at mid-year left in that area, as well as I'm lying. 9,500 remaining in travel and subsistence, and then there's professional development, just over 10,000 available for July through to December. I haven't seen those expenses roll through, and yes, you're right, it wouldn't be applied to the general ledger during June because it's coming up shortly, but there is a chance that it will be slightly over. However, when it comes down to it, it is the whole budget that will be considering, and it won't be just this, that there'll be other areas that will be made up, that'll make up for probably an overage here. So that's all I can say at this point. There is a chance, but yeah.
Your worship, if I may, just to supplement Dr. Malinchuk's response, there are also a couple of areas where I think, council with intention and is sort of well aware, chose to make some external community grants in excess of amounts that we had budgeted. So there were requests that came forward, and so you'll see that in council major projects, that budget is overexpended by $2,500. So it's not material in the scope of the municipality's overall budget, but that is over. Administration in the 2023 budget had budgeted a cost of approximately $6,000 for the Hakone conference, and that's there's a over expenditure there, but there's also offsetting revenue that came in as well. And so there are a couple of those minor areas, but I guess the largest part is, of course, council remuneration and travel, as you correctly identified. But there are, I think it should be noted, there are some areas where council has deemed some community initiatives worthy and has chosen to invest in them.
Thank you for that, Deputy Mayor Demoda.
I'm just wondering if it would be helpful if we gave Councillor Melnick the month of October off. Would that help balance things out a little easier? Or are you volunteering? Was that your ploy? You need a break? Thank you for your time.
Director Malinchuk, you indicated in the information technology section about a generator being hooked up to the server room. Can you explain, for myself in particular, but for the benefit of council and perhaps the public, how we are now protected in the event of a power outage? I know that last September with the Chettaman wildfire, there were issues even with internal communication within the organization because of that. And I think in part because the server was off-site, and with the generator now hooked up to the server room, what is our adaptability to another power outage that could otherwise impact internal communications?
Thank you, Your Worship. It's not my area of expertise, but I can say that the internal communications was on a different server, and that server has since been reallocated to an external community. So it's actually in Stony Plain, so that it can serve us if our power goes out. So that'll always now be rectified. So a lesson learned and quickly rectified. So within, not even 24 hours, we had that solution. And we will continue with that process going forward. With this, that definitely enables the server information that we have available for longer, so that we can deal with the situation. We can come up with a plan, what we're going to do going forward in that kind of an emergency. So it gives us time, and it gives us ability to work with it right off the bat.
Thank you for that. I really do appreciate administration's quick response to that. And it goes directly to the conversation we had earlier today with the Resilience Institute and some of the impacts from climate events that you don't necessarily see coming, including internal communication. So I just thank you for your part in it, and all of administration for addressing that particular issue so quickly, because communications, of course, is fundamental in an emergency event such as that wildfire. I have one question with respect to the second quarter summary spending, and it's not the numbers at all. It's just trying to get some sense of why we would be where we are. So revenue year to date appears to be about 85% and expenses at 39% halfway through the year. Two questions is there a logical explanation? Because June 30th, the tax notices would barely have gone out and they wouldn't be due until July 15th, so it wouldn't necessarily be that. So is there an explanation that you can offer? And secondly, with or without an explanation, is this consistent year over year?
Thank you, Your Worship. Because it's June 30th and the tax levy was posted prior to that, it would be set up as an accounts receivable and recognizing the revenue. So the revenue would show in this area. So that's why you would see that. And yes, consistent with prior years. So we sit very high in the finance and administration revenue, and that is why you see that. And in the expense side, as for an example, Alberta School Foundation, just a small example, 3 million has not been expended yet. So that'll be 2 more payments that has to go through. We've collected the money through the revenue part, but we haven't expended it. So then there's also transfers of say reserves that go through for capital items that you'll see that would be touching the operating budget. That's close to 2 million. There's also some reserves set up that have not been transferred yet internally, just waiting to see how the budget year goes. So there are some items that just have to wait. So it is pretty typical of what I've seen in the past, yes.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Deputy Mayor Demoda.
Thank you, Your Worship. I do have a few questions. I'm just wondering if we have any taxpayers that have been delinquent and or are late in payments from 2022, and if so, are those penalties reflected anywhere in revenue, or do we not reflect those until they're collected?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Demoda, yes, we do have a few, not a lot. We're very fortunate that we don't have many. Yes, the penalties do go to the revenue as they incur the penalties. You would see that it's set as a receivable and would hit the revenue as well. So yes, definitely it would happen anywhere, but we've been lucky. Like I said, this year 3% is in arrears for this year, and there are arrears going back into other years, but then we also have a process that we register properties through land titles with the province, and luckily we haven't had to do anything with that so far, but it is a process that ensures that the municipality will collect their tax dollars.
And the municipality works with those delinquent taxpayers or ratepayers in payment terms and things like that if need be?
Yes, of course. Communication is had. There's warnings that are issued. There is communication about the process. There's definitely a process for them to be able to work through the situation with the municipality as well. Yes.
Right. So I do have a few questions. So if other councillors want to jump in back and forth, I do have some now that the mayor has jumped into the actual physical stuff, but going into the capital reporting. I'm just wondering if you have any indication on where we're at with the skate park. We have just under $1 million there that has been allocated to that. I was of the understanding that we would start some groundwork prior to the initial project starting up. And is that in progress or considered before the snowfalls this year?
Your worship, for Councillor Demota's question, so the short answer first, no, you won't see any earth moving this year, to my knowledge. I can check with Director Greathead, who may have more information or more recent information. That said, administration has been working with the committee to advance the project. I believe that they have secured their contractor and have a construction agreement in place. And then they'll be working through the permitting process. So I can bring an update to council, email out an update maybe would be easier for council. Certainly, we already have a motion directing a conversation about the skate park to the 2024 budget discussions. And if the organization has been able to secure that fixed price contract, that's where we would know what the municipality's total exposure is, financially speaking. And that would probably be an appropriate time to give you a construction timeline update. But my understanding is that we were seeing this as a 2024 project.
I appreciate the update. So the majority, if not all of that, that's been earmarked for 2023 will get deferred to 24. Okay, thank you. And then I guess the next question I have, again, it's just kind of been like this little thing of mine, is the bulk water sandy dump station. Are we getting close to target on getting that going, and could we see some potential revenues again by the time snow flies?
Your worship, for Councillor Demota, my understanding on that is that the facility is constructed. I haven't been by recently to see if they've done the paving of the entranceways. I know we're getting towards the end of the paving season, but it really is the control system inside the building and the payment collection system that is the last to come. You have to build everything and then start to do the computer stuff. The last update that I had from Director Greathead was that was underway, or at least that we'd secured a contractor to do that. I don't have information about when it's going to be operational, but we can certainly follow up and get back to council.
Great. And then my last one, and this is more involving fleet. I see that a number of our service vehicles have gone over budget a little bit, and I was just going to ask where that, and I'm sorry if I'm asking you to repeat yourself if you have addressed it already. I missed it, and where does that get recouped on those overages? Through you, your worship, to our Director of Finance, Ms. Malchak.
Your worship, through to Councillor Demota. There is a within policy, we're able to approve up to 10%. I'm going to have to refresh my memory now, and I don't know if I have that one open.
I guess while you're looking, maybe the other part of that question would be, could that money that we were going to put back to MSI, the 23,000 that we saved on those other vehicles, be used on those, so that there's no impact negatively, or less impact negatively?
Your worship, through to Councillor Demota, yes, that's a possibility. So in 5.4 of the policy, it does state that directors, upon recommendation from a manager, may authorize additional gross expenditures where costs for a capital project increase to the extent that they exceed the original funding approval for capital project in the amount not exceeding 10%. So then after that being said, where capital in 5.6, where a capital project is overcommitted and the funds are not available from another capital project, the Director of Finance and Administration, with the approval of the CAO, is authorized to approve the necessary funds from reserves, reserve funds, or other appropriate sources, provided the original scope of the project is not exceeded, and that the required funds do not exceed the lesser of either 10% or approve 10% of the approved project budget, or 350,000. Such allocation shall be reported as part of the quarterly capital project status. So you can see that there is there are some that are over in, and yes, there are areas that other capital projects are going to be coming under. So we do see that there is the room to accommodate, and the initial scope is still being completed within the project.
I appreciate that, and sorry if I put you on the spot there, and that's good.
Luckily, I had that one open. I don't usually. Thank you.
Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. To Director Melanchuk, I'm really happy to see that paid parking is doing well. Do you have an idea of what we've generated so far?
I believe the last time, Your Worship, through to Councillor Hall, I believe the last time that I looked, which was a week and a half ago, we were just 5,000 short of hitting our budget. So we might have hit it already. I wanted to check it today, but I didn't have a chance.
That's really great news. Just a really quick question. Capital projects, sport field upgrade, is that referring to the baseball diamonds, or is that a different field? It's just under activity center. I'm just curious what that means.
Sorry, just 1 second.
Unlike Director Malinchak, I'm never scared to put an answer out there without having the full information. So, that may also be improvements to Commemoration Park. I believe we'd applied for some grant funding to support some initiatives there. And I think that might be reflective of that item. So sport field, I think, is just the catch-all. Did I get that right?
Yeah. Yes, you did.
Councillor Waxer.
Through you to CAO Given, I wondered if you had any update on the columbarium and cemetery improvements, because I know that was a concern earlier.
Thanks very much, Your Worship. For Councillor Waxer, at this time, no work started on that. There may have been some preliminary high-level feasibility review by administration, but in terms of current staffing levels, we're still looking to secure a position to take over some of the responsibilities on the cemetery file. We haven't been able to do that yet this year, and I think that this is one of those items that just due to staff capacity, we haven't been able to move forward with as quickly as we'd like.
If I might just follow up on Councillor Hall's question about sports field upgrades. If you are correct that the $100,000 itemized is in respect to Commemoration Park, can you see whether there is anything currently allocated to additional safety fences at Centennial Park?
Your Worship, there is not, to my knowledge. I think that issue was raised this year. I think not that it was unknown previously, but it was certainly raised at the council table this year. Administration has heard that, and it's something that we would like to consider either as an operational item or a capital item. I think to be determined, but we certainly heard that and would be considering it for the 2024 budget.
Thank you, and that will be a council initiative in any event. I expect if council wants that in the budget for 2024, we can address that when we review the 2024 capital budget. On the same item, I just want to confirm, we earlier today passed a motion for the reallocation of capital funds. And is it the grounds 4x4 quad cab 1 ton that has been deleted as opposed to the other 4x4 1 ton that comes under the water? I presume it must be because the water would pay for itself.
Yes, Your Worship, you're correct.
Thank you. Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Director Melanchuk. Director Ledon had indicated that we were able to assist our neighbors by sending equipment and firefighters, and that we would be billing the appropriate agency or so on. Looking at the revenue for legislative and protective services after 6 months, Have we already received that, and has that been billed, or is that yet to come?
Your worship, through Councillor Melnick, it has been invoiced. I would have to check to see if it has been actually received and removed from the accounts receivable, but it definitely has. You would see it applied as it was invoiced to. So yes.
Thank you for that. She indicated that that would be a bit of excess revenue this year that wouldn't be in there necessarily for next year. And, you know, if it's been invoiced, so we have that in there, which is good. I do also have a question about parking, because to me, there are 5 areas of parking. We have retail paid parking. We have fines, sidewalk seating revenue, which may or may not be considered parking, Block S, and storage lot parking. And not necessarily for this meeting, but perhaps for the committee of the whole, it might be good for council to know where those 5 areas, where those revenues are allocated. I believe retail paid parking is legislative and protective, but I'm unclear as to the other 4 where they are. And I think as we go into the budget cycle, it would be good for all of us to have, first of all, where those 5 go and the relative size of that during 2023. And I don't expect an answer today, because that's a bit of an ask.
Your worship, through to Councillor Melnick. Yes, of course, we can distinguish which areas they fit within, just so that it's clear. Though when I was speaking of paid parking, I was only speaking of the paid parking with the apps and the kiosks and on street and in the parking lot, so not including the S block or sidewalk seating or whatnot. So yes, we can clarify those areas because we did have them segmented differently in 2022 than we did in 2023. So we can go over that and so that you know where they lie. Yeah.
Perfect.
Rather than letting that sit as a request from Councillor Melnick alone, I would ask council whether there is consent to requesting that information from administration. There's no objection to that, so you consider that a request from council, even though it was just from Councillor Melnick, just for additional information about the breakdown of parking revenues for a future committee of the whole meeting.
Yep.
Thank you. Councillor Demoda.
Well, on that note, I was just thinking on the side, would council be interested in looking at what a parking stall is worth and reviewing that process going forward? I know that we already have contracts in place for private use of public space, but I think it would be a worthwhile exercise to see if we're overcharging or undercharging for each stall that's being used for either a boardwalk or seating in those areas.
Conceptually, I agree with that, although it seems to me that we will, at the end of the paid parking season, get a report, and we can, from that, I would hope, calculate the relative value of the stall and decide whether or not the price that we charge is reflective of reality. So I think it will come organically when we get the report, if we make it so. I'm not sure that we have to make a special request of administration's. All I'm saying, that can be our work when we get the report.
Yeah, I just didn't want to be perceived as that being something that was initiated by me solely. So.
Are there any further questions for our Director of Finance and Administration? Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Your Worship. The question is about capital, and we have a few instances where we have, page 58, where we have a couple of references to engine replacement. And I see there's a slight coding difference. Engine 2 replacement is $350,000 on one line. And then I see engine 2 replacement is $271,000 on another line, and that's on page 58 under protective services. Just to help me understand, is that broken out that way due to is the 22 in the middle of the coding of is that referred to budget years and how that works? I just for some clarity, as opposed to having just one line for engine 2. And this happens on a few other items.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Melnick. Yes, so the the fourth segment is referring to the year, so that we have a good idea of, okay, what amount was carried forward from the prior year and what is the new amount that was approved for the current year. So the only thing that happened with that will be, I can see, and I fine tune this and go through and look for the details closer to year end. What happened there was the wrong GL was used, so a journal entry would be applied to the coding of the 22 year, so that the funds were used in 22 first over the 23 year. But that's something I usually do closer in November and December.
Wow.
But yes, you are correct, and that was a system implemented by myself so that I would know and be able to show the carry forward items versus the new amounts that were approved in a given year.
Councillor DeModa.
Well, I really like that observation, Councillor Melnick, and now that when you look at that fourth number designation, there are some that say 04 on there. I'm hoping that we're not working on things that are 19 years old, but there is the wayfinding from 2020. Is some of that being used this year, or are we looking at deferring that again to 2024 under roads?
Your Worship, for Councillor DeModa, at the time, I don't believe we've expended any or a significant amount of that. We would be looking forward. We would be requesting to council, rolling that forward. We certainly do still have our wayfinding need. We have our plan. We just simply need to activate that plan. I think there may be a discussion at budget time about how long that funding is going to be supported. I believe some of the source of funding was from ID12. And getting that's a bit long in the tooth, we may need to have a discussion about them, whether they're willing to continue to support that project.
And just to further that, through your worship to Mr. Given, to your knowledge at this point, as far as the wayfinding signage, is that off of the recommendations that came forward from the company that designed our entrance signs and the trickle from that interior wayfinding in that project itself? Does that make sense?
Your Worship, for Councillor DeModa, yes, that does make sense. My understanding is that this would all be based on, when the work starts, it will all be consistent with the wayfinding standards that were previously reviewed to council. I believe that was maybe just slightly before I arrived, but it is intended to be consistent with that approach, and also consistent with our visual identity and our new logo, which incorporates some of the colors that came from that wayfinding work that happened earlier. Thank you.
Are there any further questions for Dr. Melanchuk and her report? If not, is there a councillor prepared to make a motion the council receive the report for information? Councillor Waxer? All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. So thank you for that report. And Let me say how absolutely delightful it was to hear you say that you have achieved perfection. You use that with reference to the surplus, but for you to say that you have found perfection, that makes my day. We move now to agenda item 6.8, added by Councillor Melnick for a council discussion regarding that very perfected operating surplus.
Thank you very much, Your Worship, and I'm glad to have the opportunity to further discuss the surplus. In Director Melnick's report, she did indicate that yes, there would be a report coming to us, and I probably didn't read that reserve request for decision to be the same thing as a report on the surplus. And I have noted that the surplus, which was reported to us, and I don't have a date of this document, and it was prior to the audit being done, and there are also numerous adjustments that have to be made to an operating surplus. But at one point we were presented with $1.3 million as a surplus, and now we have 700,000. And I guess for us to, when we have this request for decision, it would be good for us to know how that 700,000 occurred. Was it due to things not being done that had to be reintroduced into the budget? Was it staff positions that weren't filled? Was it something that we just discontinued a process? Because this would have an implication for future years with the budget, because we really shouldn't have, in general, a surplus of 700,000. And so I'd like to have an opportunity to have that discussion about how we got to 700,000 last year and how we can avoid being in that situation in 2024, 2023, where we're dealing with surpluses in $700,000, $800,000, $900,000 amounts. We really shouldn't be at that point. It is an indication that maybe we're overcharging our residents if we're running into surpluses, unless we can explain why we have the surplus.
Thank you, Councillor Melnick. Mr. Gibbon, go ahead.
Your Worship, I think that's absolutely a fair conversation. And I think it's also worth noting that the municipality's total budget is somewhere in the area of $20 million. And so percentage wise, we're, I think if we look at it in that scale, we can recognize that, Director Melnick and her team do a pretty good job of bringing us pretty well within. I think what's a reasonable variance, given the variety of activities the municipality undertakes, and a lot of them that are subjective and that we don't know. I think it is absolutely important for council to understand what makes up that variance and what are the reasons for it. And that's the type of thing the council should be questioning at quarterly financial statements, at budget, and during Director Melnick's report when she makes a report.
No, thank you, and I appreciate that, and understand that this will be part of the committee of the whole on the 12th.
Perfect, thank you. I think that takes us then to agenda item 7, notices of motion. There are none. Councillor reports. Agenda item 9. 8. Any reports for council? Councillor Melnick.
I would like to report that the Homecoming 2023 was a very successful event, and I understand a number of councillors were able to make some of the social situations. I was not. And on behalf of the museum, I'd like to thank the support of the municipality, and I think we had a great opportunity to welcome back a number of residents, and I'm sure they enjoyed the support of the the various businesses and the municipality with all of the activities that occurred during that celebration.
Thank you, Councillor Melnick. Any other reports? Just following up on comments from Councillor Melnick, I did attend both the reception at the museum for the homecoming and spoke at the homecoming dinner, and it was generally very well attended. And I think people left with a great impression of their hometown. They were very delighted to be back and spending money in the community they often grew up in. It was a great homecoming, and credit to those who were involved, the museum in particular, but also some of the class representatives who did a great deal of work encouraging people to attend. Sorry, Councillor Miller.
And if I may, Your Honor, the dates that were selected were personally I lobbied for by myself, and as such, we enjoyed great weather. And it always is good to take credit for the weather after the fact.
Just a couple of additional reports. Councillor Melnick and I did in fact celebrate the 100th anniversary of the display locomotive across Connaught 6015. And I believe Councillor Keller-Rempe showed up to do her own celebrating about the time we were leaving. But I do again draw attention to the young individual from Grand Prairie who alerted us to the fact that particular unit on display in our community rolled off the line in Canada in 100 years ago on August 19th. I will report very briefly that last week, I can't remember the day, Wednesday of last week, 30th, I met virtually with the mayors of Banff and Canmore again to strategically discuss our ongoing engagement with the province in terms of designation as tourism-based communities and our outreach during the upcoming Alberta Communities Convention. So that is hopefully about to restart. Are there any other reports? Councillor Demota?
Well, just kind of, I was going for a segue, but that'll get intervened regardless. Just a reminder that because it's been identified that the Jasper Crisis Team fundraising golf tournament is this Friday. Yourself, Councillor Wilson, and Councillor Hall, including me, are the foursome on that team. So just a reminder that we did sign up for that in June, and it's here already. My goodness. Thank you.
All right, thank you. If there are no further council reports, I'm sorry, Councillor.
I apologize if I forgot about this one, but Mayor Ireland and I both attended the event at the museum, Ukrainian around the opening of the Ukrainians in Jasper celebration at the museum. And it was very beautifully done and was commemorating an important day in Ukrainian culture. And there was food and a very informative display. So I wanted to make sure that got acknowledged.
Thank you for that, Councillor Lasher. I had forgotten to report, and that was in fact on Ukrainian Independence Day, August 24th. All right, I will move us along now, if I can, to agenda item 9, upcoming events. As Councillor Demota just indicated, the crisis team fundraising golf tournament on Friday, in which 4 of us are engaged. Jasper Folk Music Festival this weekend, September 8th and 9th. Tomorrow, not on our list is an opening or ribbon cutting, sauntering, I think they're calling it, for the work at the activity center. An energy festival in Hinton on September 22nd. The Alberta Tourism Advocacy Summit on September 25th in Calgary. My understanding is that Councillor Keller-Harampe and CAO Given and myself will be attending that. And followed by the Alberta Municipalities Convention and Trade Show in Edmonton. And the Jasper Chamber of Commerce AGM, which unfortunately falls on a day when most of us will be at the convention.
I will attend.
You will be there. Thank you. Are there any other upcoming events which should be drawn to the attention of council? Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Your Worship. We do have one of our annual festivals coming up, and that'll be the Dark Sky Festival, which I'm sure we'll list. But I would like to highlight a new event for that festival, and it happens on Thursday, the 12th of October, and it is a fundraising event sponsored by the Rotary Club of Jasper. And we brought in Mark Garneau to come and speak, and he will also be speaking with the schools in town, and will be here for the weekend. It's his first visit to Jasper, being a retired MP, and we are looking forward to having him here, and he'll be here through until departing on Sunday morning, and will participate in some other events. But certainly Dark Sky is just around the corner, and encourage any individuals to purchase tickets to attend the dinner on a Thursday night.
Thank you, Councillor Melnick. If that is it for upcoming events, I will move to agenda item 9.1, which is the request for an in-camera session. I am going to anticipate that you could confirm, Councillor Hall, that you would not anticipate any motion or other action by council following that in-camera meeting. So I will call momentarily that we move to that in-camera session, and when we return to open session, it will be for the purposes of adjournment. So for those who have been watching on our live stream, thank you all very much. And we will adjourn. Well, we won't adjourn. We will recess for in-camera and subsequently adjourn. But we bid you adieu and thank you for joining us today. Might I have a motion to move in camera at 3:58 p.m.? Councillor Demola.
Before that, in the event that we do go over a 4-hour limit for a regular meeting, I would like to move that council approves an extension beyond 4 hours if need be. I don't want to go there.
Pessimistic. We're only at 2.5 hours.
Well, isn't it 4 o'clock now?
Yes.
So isn't it usually 4:30? Oh, right. Sorry, it's a long day.
He's not used to being up early.
They usually call it at 4:30. That's different.
Which is 3 hours.
That's right. Okay, that's perfect.
All right. So it's still 3:58 though. So a motion to move in camera. Councillor Hall, thank you. All those in favor? That is carried. We are in camera.
Smart like